This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Here is something that we've become quite used to hearing.
Charles Leclerc is on pole position with a new track record. Pole in Spa, pole in Monza, pole in Singapore. He can do nothing to stop Charles Leclerc in Baku. The first time one driver's taken more than one pole position here, and it's a sixth of the season for Charles Leclerc. It was Charles Leclerc, it was always going to be Charles Leclerc, and he's delivered for them.
And here is something that we aren't used to hearing.
He won in Spa, he wins in Monza. Charles Leclerc is the winner. Charles Leclerc wins the Bahrain Grand Prix. He takes victory. Charles Leclerc wins the Austrian Grand Prix.
As I'm recording this video after the Japanese Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc has had 18 pole positions, but only 5 Grand Prix wins. Autosport after Singapore released a graphic on their social media, which showed that when it comes to winning from pole position, Charles Leclerc now has the 9th worst pole-to-win ratio in Formula 1 history. With Leclerc, out of his 18 pole positions, only 4 times did he then go on to convert them into a win. And in fact, his last win as of recording in Austria was the very first time in his career where he won without starting on pole. But what does all of this mean? Is it just a coincidence, bad luck, or is Leclerc actually, as some on the internet call him, a pole merchant? To give an example of a driver in recent years who was far better on Saturdays than Sundays, and definitely could be described as a pole merchant, you've got to look at Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri will always be a great driver. Especially around a single lap, he was more than able to hold a candle to Lewis, and this wasn't even just a Mercedes thing, because even going back to his rookie season for Williams in 2013, his first big headline performance that made everyone stand up and take notice was putting a very poor Williams 3rd on the grid at the Canadian Grand Prix. Even during this year, during the early parts of the season when the Alfa Romeo was one of the best cars in the midfield, Valtteri was showing his class, putting the Alfa 6th in Bahrain and even 5th in Miami. However, despite that stunning raw pace, when it came to the highest pressure situations, fighting for a championship across 20 plus races and going up against Lewis Hamilton in the same car, in the races Valtteri just didn't have the same consistency, his racecraft was lacking at times, and mentally he wasn't able to ruthlessly convert those pole positions into mind-crushing wins that would really affect Lewis. Out of the 20 pole positions that Valtteri had, he only ended up with 10 Grand Prix wins, with only 6 of them being from pole position. That puts his pole-to-win conversion at just 30%, meaning he's just above Leclerc in that regard. However, having said that, when it comes to Charles, I wouldn't call him a pole merchant, despite his stats, on paper at least, being even worse than Valtteri's. With Leclerc, to me, there's just none of the same mental deficiencies that Valtteri had against Lewis. Charles, in his very first season at Ferrari, came into a team that was wrapped around Seb's finger for years, and within 2 races in Bahrain, he proved that not only did he have the speed to outqualify Seb, but had it not have been for his MGU-H recovery failing, he would have converted his first ever pole position into his first Grand Prix win. In just his 2nd ever race for Ferrari up against a 4-time world champion who had been there for years, we knew immediately that this was not going to be a Bottas at Mercedes situation. So if mentality is not the problem in my opinion, what about the cars that he's driving? Well, before we get into that, I am going to very quickly thank Surfshark, who are the sponsor of today's video. Surfshark is a virtual private network that allows you to be fully protected on the internet by changing your internet IP and hiding your location. There are countless benefits that Surfshark provide, like protecting your data, blocking ads whilst you're browsing, and also allowing you to access content that might not be available in your country. So for example, during F1 preseason testing, I was out in Bahrain, and whilst I was out there, I wanted to catch up with all of the Premier League games on the Sky Sports channel. But because they don't have the broadcast rights to show the highlights outside of the UK, those videos just weren't there. No problem, however, because with Surfshark, in only a few clicks you can connect to a server in the UK, refresh the page, and now I can watch all of the videos that weren't available. That's just one of many benefits, and by using my promo code AUDACE, or by clicking the link at the very top of the description, you can save 83% off and get an extra 3 months for free as well. On top of that, Surfshark also has a 30-day money-back guarantee if you decide to change your mind. It's a great deal, so make sure to check them out if you're curious, and thank you again to Surfshark. Now, the problem with analysing every single pole position that Charles has ever had is that his time at Ferrari has been complicated and blurred with good cars, bad cars, controversies, and questions whether it's Ferrari that can't build a good enough car, or if it's Charles who hasn't been able to take command of the race, or even stints to hang on to the win. However, the one small constant that I have noticed is that ever since 2019, there has been some kind of inherent issue when it comes to Leclerc, Ferrari, and tyre wear. Now, I am not going to talk too much about 2019 because, on top of the fact that Charles had the most pole positions with 7 and only came away with 2 wins, there is a whole 2019 Ferrari illegal engine controversy that will forever hang over that season. With 2020 also being an absolute stinker for Ferrari, which I'm sure everyone wants to quickly forget, let's focus on 2021, and more importantly, the title fight in 2022. In 2021, Ferrari had a car that was fighting for 3rd in the Constructors with McLaren, and undoubtedly were a midfield team with podiums being their highlight. But there were tracks and circumstances where Ferrari seemed to have genuine one-lap pace. Leclerc managed to put the car on pole twice in Monaco and Baku, and whilst it's easy to say that it was just Leclerc putting a tractor on pole with his brilliance, let's not forget that Sainz also was up there, qualifying 4th in Monaco 2/10 away and 5th in Baku 3/10 away. In those races, I am happy to give Leclerc the pass because in Monaco, he wouldn't have even been on pole position because there were drivers on better laps when he crashed, and in Baku he got eaten up by the Merc and Red Bull after only a couple of laps. But there were still signs that Ferrari had some kind of problem early on with their tyres. In France, the team had a disastrous race with both of their drivers out of the points, after which Matteo Binotto said himself that the team needed to analyse and deconstruct their car and setup to find out why they had such high tyre wear. This wasn't such a big deal overall in 2021 because in their fight with McLaren, the team did end up finding a compromise, and in the second half of the season, talk of their tyres seemed to go away. 2022 was the year of new opportunities, a clean slate, and a resurgent Ferrari which saw them back fighting for wins. But again, as the season has progressed, Leclerc's pole tally has been more than healthy with 9 pole positions this season, but that win tally has been his and Ferrari's downfall with just 3 wins as of recording. So what is going on again with Leclerc and Ferrari on a Saturday compared to a Sunday? Even though these are brand new regulations with a brand new aero philosophy which relies a lot more on the ground effect, somehow, I think that core Ferrari traits, even going as far back as 2019, are still in the 2022 car. The ultimate pace of a car is dictated by what the fastest driver is able to get out of it. Now, whether or not both drivers are able to get a similar level of performance out of the car speaks to how easy the car is to drive at the limit, how well suited the car is to both drivers, and also how adaptable both drivers are able to be. All year long, the F175 has been a fast but sketchy car to drive. It very much is a car that is on the nose but more nervous at the rear, which does help with rotation. And whilst that, in combination with its downforce, has allowed Leclerc to thrive off that, it took Sainz a few races to chip away until he was able to get even close to the level of Leclerc. Throughout this season, over one lap, that car in the hands of Leclerc has been competitive. he's been able to live with what the car is throwing back at him, and they haven't suffered as much with the tyre warm-up issues as Mercedes have, for example, because the Ferrari is much better at switching on its tyres and getting them into that operating window. Unfortunately, the F175 in the races just hasn't been able to preserve its tyres as well as either the Red Bull or even the Mercedes. In Spa, Carlos Sainz almost lost a podium to George Russell late on, around a track that was easily one of Mercedes' weakest. Ferrari did a great job in finding performance and downforce, which has meant that it has left teams like McLaren behind, with whom they were fighting with just last season. But those performance gains have come at a cost of a car that up against the RB18, especially since Spa, just isn't able to sustain its speed throughout the entire race. Even taking the last two races as examples, in Singapore when everyone switched onto the dry tyre, Leclerc was hustling Checo in that last stint, trying to force him into a mistake on a partially damp track, but by the end as the tyres started to wear, his pace fell off a cliff as he finished 7 seconds back at the line. In Suzuka at the restart with everyone on brand new Inters, again, Leclerc was kind of keeping pace with Verstappen, but as the stint went on, he again fell off a cliff and fell into the clutches of Checo. At the line, Max had built up a 26-second gap in just 28 laps, and there was a very interesting picture that was taken after the race of both Max's and Charles's tyres, and you could visibly see that whilst Max still had a decent amount of tread left, Charles's Inters on the inside shoulder were much more heavily worn and even started to turn into slicks, with less tread to clear the water. Now, when it comes to why Ferrari have worse tyre wear than Red Bull, I am sure that very question is keeping a lot of Ferrari engineers up at night in Maranello. Red Bull have lots of efficient downforce, which has allowed them on power circuits like Spa and Monza to run ridiculous amounts of wing, still be strong in a straight line, and in combination, not put too much stress on their tyres. Whilst Ferrari need to run smaller wings, which gives them that raw performance, but with less downforce there's more sliding, which stresses the tyres more, and also works them harder in the corners, either on turn-in or out of traction zones, or both. Of course, the question then is, how much is that tyre wear issue the car, and how much is it the drivers? Whether it's in the dry or in the wet, Ferrari are setting their car up to get as much performance out of it, but that seems to come at the cost of tyre wear. And it's easy to say, well, set your car up to have better tyre wear for the race instead of quali, but then they probably feel like they're losing too much in terms of raw performance, and there's no point in having the same tyre wear as Mercedes if it means compromising your car's balance and downforce so much that you are as slow as them and over half a second off the pace. But even if there is a plausible reason why Ferrari are quicker in quali in the hands of Leclerc, but not quite able to hang on to it against Max and Checo in the race, going back to the question of, should we be worried about Leclerc's bad pole to quali conversion rate? The answer is absolutely yes. Not so much that let's blame Leclerc because he's a quali merchant, or let's blame Ferrari because they're terrible, but if they want to come back stronger in 2023, they need to figure out what it is in their design philosophy that has allowed Leclerc to shine in qualifying, but that's not allowing him to compete more on a Sunday. And this is not just a Ferrari issue. Leclerc also needs to analyze himself, the way he drives, the way he leads and dictates the car's development, and figure out what part of the problem he is as well. Looking back at that last stint in Singapore, to get the best visual representation of what I'm going to talk about, just go back and watch Leclerc chase down Checo. When I watch Leclerc drive, it's incredible car control and it's box office entertainment. The car is always moving mid-corner, exit of corners, and Leclerc is just so active on the steering wheel with little mini corrections. Clearly he feels to push and get performance out of the car, he needs to drive like that. But whilst that style is so dramatic and incredible to watch, what part is that Leclerc overdriving, overheating his tyres, and is it really the right style for Ferrari to build around? I think for now, it's a case of Leclerc has got to drive the way he drives to keep Ferrari's head above water. We've also seen this from Carlos Sainz that the F175 is still an edgy car at the limit, and that's partly why Leclerc spun and binned it in France. Leclerc and Ferrari as a package need to look at what car and driving style can utilize Leclerc's raw speed and be good enough across a whole race. Leclerc has got the stuff to be a world champion, there is no doubt about that in my mind. But he needs to start also cracking the whip at Ferrari and leading the development if the current path, despite being fast, is not consistent and comfortable enough for him to drive on the limit. It's a question of Ferrari doing better and building a good enough car that can work across a range of tracks, but also Leclerc proving that he's capable enough of being at the factory to steer the team using his talents as a driver. Great drivers end up in great cars, yes, but what the sustained success of drivers like Lewis and Michael have shown is that great drivers in great teams also sustain great cars because they are always able to give the right feedback and steer the team in the right way with what they need to win Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc is not a pole merchant. He's got too much talent and he's too strong mentally to only be a one-lap specialist. I don't know how hard he's pushing back at the factory, but all great drivers have to be able to lead a team technically. On track, neither he nor Ferrari look like they quite understand why the car and tyres are not sustainable over the course of a race distance. And it's the job of the team and him to do better if they want to finally break the Ferrari drought and become world champions. Well, there you have it, another video in the bag. If you did enjoy this one and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that really helps. And once again, a massive shout out to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to use my code ALDAS or check out the link at the very top of the description to get 83% off and an extra 3 months for free as well. And once again, a big thank you to Surfshark. Anyway, there you have it, and I'll see you in the next one.